Oh, okay, good evening. I want to talk a little bit about the fact that there will be one more bookstore marketing campaign that's actually going to be for the first book, the Gay Conservative Lashes Back book, which is this. And that will support the professional screenplay and professional treatment I'm having done, which runs parallel to my own activities to write my own. And that will kind of close out all the spending I'm doing right now on marketing the books, but I'm giving it a real try to really get the interest. So what I would like to do first is, well, of course, show you that that's the first of these books, which is on the left side of my commercial page, the Do Ask Do Tell info page. But I've also got it, online on my own site. I'll just mention something on the back cover and right at first, because I had said that the Bill of Rights was around 208 years old when the book was actually published in 2000. That was close to right. I think it was December 15, 1791 that 3/4 of the states ratified. Now it'd be more like about 200 and what's 232 years, I think. And that's the problem on the back cover is saying something like that. You want to give a sense of time to something, but you want to give a sense of time to somebody browsing the book in the store. But then over time, if the book's out there a long time, that statement will become misleading unless they look at the copyright date. So that's one thing. I just wanted to go over the parts of this book. The first 4 chapters are narrative chapters. The first chapter is called Don't Ask, Don't Tell, 1961. And that covers my expulsion from William and Mary and right after Thanksgiving in 1961, and goes through my treatment at NIH and then my getting into the workforce and finishing undergraduate work at home, living at home. But it also talks about the the initial issues of, my admitting to the dean that I was a latent homosexual, and, it was pinning a label on myself. Well, now we know that labels and words really mean a lot with the debates that are going on today, but they meant something then, and it was kind of parallel to what's going on now, actually, of what people could take in a closed quarter environment, even in a dorm. So chapter 2, Sputnik, the draft, and the proles, talk about my experience in graduate school as an assistant instructor grading students, when they were vulnerable to the draft, as well as getting a degree myself, and that was actually kind of harrowing. But also my own getting drafted in February of 1968, and because I was behind physically, I was a little bit of a feminine boy, as some would say, but I was not. There weren't the pressures around that there are now, and I came through this. It was very harrowing, but I passed basic combat training. My physical fitness improved tremendously while I was in special training companies and in basic training. So that's an interesting tale to tell today, given what's going on. Chapter 3, I call my second coming. When I came out a second time in 1973, went to great lengths to move into New York City, explored the 9th Street Center, Paul Rosenfeld's, the talk group and everything, and then sort of distanced myself from them after a falling out, and got involved with Dan Fry's group in Arizona while living in New York and flying back, and then moved to Texas. And in the 1980s, I managed not to get infected, even though I had been active for a long time. But I got involved with the buddy program and what that meant, and what my role was in helping calm things down in Dallas, even before and contacting the enemy, so to speak, who tried to pass a very draconian law in 1983. So I talk about that. Chapter 4 is the biggie chapter. It's the chapter about about all the considerations for trying to repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Remember, this book was being written in the middle 90s, shortly after Bill Clinton had announced his Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy at Fort McNair. So I go through all the legal ramifications and talk about some of the other cases, and I compare it to my own argument, that confined spaces in a military barracks is a little bit like confined spaces in a dorm, in my experience. But of course, that could be like confined spaces today, women's spaces today. And when you argue something like that, there's some risk that it'll come back and be argued in a way that you may not want. And that seems to have happened. But anyway, the 5th chapter, the 4 narrative chapters are sort of like the synoptic gospels. Now we're into the epistles, I guess, or something. But the 5th chapter, I just talk about the civilian workplace, whether the ban affects it. And I talk about the issue, the normal issues of discrimination. Then I talk about the family values and the fact that during that time, the 80s, from the 70s to the 90s, men, single, there wasn't gay marriage yet. Men like me were often single, often had fewer debts. It cost us less to live, so I was often better off than the people with families, which was an irony. But sometimes I worked more overtime, as an IT person without being paid, than people who had family obligations. So that was a very sensitive thing. Then in the last chapter, I talk about my proposal for what I call a right to privacy amendment. I also had a proposed amendment involving gay marriage, which would be obsolete now because of Obergefell. So, but anyway, I wanted to basically codify all of substantive due process, which of course is what the furor was about in 2015 when Alito, the Supreme Court and Alito's opinion and so forth, and struck down Roe versus Wade, but they struck down, they put into question a lot of the other things like the sodomy law ruling and gay marriage and even contraception, which no one seems to want to challenge, but they made it an issue again. So those are the parts of the book. Now, as far as the film treatment, I'm emphasizing chapters 1, 2, and 4, and then just summarizing 3 out of 4. Because I want the theme of the book to be very coherent, to be about living in closed spaces when you have to, and how that affects individual liberty. That's a real important theme in this book. So I kind of build the structure of the screenplay that I'm going to propose. I'm going to make a sort of a slideshow style film with lots and lots of stills, and with the storytelling broken up into those 3 chapters, and I'll point out in this slideshow where the points of the Harmon Circle are and what some of the viewpoint or philosophical conflicts are and so forth, and how they affect the people. But of course, since this is spread out over so much time, you don't have the tight structure of just characters in one localized or contained story, because this is spread out over several decades. But you can still make a circle and do storytelling out of it. So I thought maybe I'll just, since I'm doing this on a computer, since I'm doing this on a screen capture Camtasia, you see I can capture my own image when I want to. That's why it actually presents a mirror image of the book, so I think I have to do something like this. Took my mother's old mirror from the train set, and you can still show the front page of the book properly by using another mirror. I guess I could work this out. It would sound like another quantum slit experiment or something. But anyway, that's what I have for tonight. Is there will be one more important bookstore pitch fest, bookstore, not pitch fest, but bookstore campaign, trying to get a certain number of bookstores to order to have copies of the book on hand with a returnability policy and everything. And we did that with the second book about 5 or 6 months, I think last winter. So we're doing this in order to supplement the attempt to get film interest. People know that sometimes self-published books don't always sell as well, because a lot of times they're about a very specialized narrative that someone has, but sometimes they still become interesting to film, especially independent film and video and streaming type films, maybe more than the larger films. That's kind of a new trend, so that's what I'm trying to focus on. I'll be 80 years old and pretty soon on July the 10th, so I don't have infinite resources with the way I manage the trust, and I don't have a lot of income to add to it, so I won't have resources to do this forever. But this is the last major thing to do, a bookstore marketing campaign on the first book, so we've already done it on the second. The third book has never been part of this because it just wasn't set up that way, but I'll talk about that again soon. And thank you for listening.